Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Deanna.
Deanna, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I am doing very well. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me to record an episode. Now, for everyone listening, before we kind of dive into this, I'm going to share a little bit so everyone listening knows who you are, Deanna. Deanna is an Academy member. She has been with us for coming up a year, but been training with me a lot longer. We connected originally, well, probably 5 years ago, something like that, maybe even longer than that. And yeah, you're going to tell us all about kind of your fitness journey and a little bit about kind of your experiences, and right up to current day, training online with us. And we know we've all been through an interesting 2 years, the last 2 years, and part of that is going to be no doubt the journey that got you to training with us at the Nock Academy. So yeah, I love to start really, where is a better place to start than your early influences? And I love to hear, this fascinates me, no matter how many times I record shows, is the early influences of life. So when you were growing up as a kid, what kind of exercise, nutrition, health, what was that like? And what kind of messaging and, things did you pick up as a kid in that environment? And how did that kind of impact you current day?
Right. Well, thank you for having me. This
Of
is
course.
very exciting for me. I feel like I have known you for a long time, but I am realizing when you get to do these podcasts, you get to learn different things about some of these people, right? So I'm happy to share. So I feel early years, I was a kid who was into sports and team sports, and I actually feel very thankful about that, because on reflecting and when I read about people and their fitness journeys, I realize that for some people, just a huge obstacle for to overcome is just that they weren't those people as younger people. They didn't really have fitness naturally in their lives. So I'm really lucky. Growing up, I was always into playing sports, and particularly team sports. So volleyball and basketball and a little bit of track and field. And that was just kind of my go-to extracurricular more than the arts or other things like that. So I was very naturally drawn to that, and accustomed to being sweaty and in a gym, and accustomed a little bit, another thing I appreciate now, to the discipline of being on teams, right?
Yeah.
So what it means to practice, what it means to have to be there early in the morning before the sun's come up, because that's the only practice slot that's available at the high school gym at that time. So really that's how kind of fitness has came to me naturally, and started early on, was just through doing fun things like sports. That was a great outlet for me.
Yeah, and that's a common, like you said, it's typically one or the other. We have those really great early influences of exercise and movement, and the other side, like you said, where that isn't part of what happens. And that was much like me as a kid. I didn't have that until I was a teenager, because it wasn't something we did in our house. My dad had a very physical job, so that was his kind of thing. So was no, and I didn't see that obviously because he was out at work. So I didn't get those influences in it. And my family aren't really into sport and activity, on that level. So I never really got, unless I was interested in it, which I wasn't at the time, I didn't get that influence. So yeah, and it has a big effect, right? Like what we lay down early in life makes a huge impact on us and imprints on us a lot later in life. And, so many people are thankful of that I hear. You raise an interesting point there on discipline, and how we are, again, something that's probably inbred into us when we have that, right? People having to get up and, go out to practice, swim practice or hockey practice or whatever it might be, and doing that kind of early in the morning and having to get that done. And it speaks a lot to, I think, from what I see from you, Deanna, is the consistency. You are hands down one of the most consistent people I've ever trained, and it stands out like that. Just being there, we don't know, not every day's perfect, not every environment's perfect, but we get up, we come in that kind of discipline. So that is obviously sat with you a lot, and I think as well it helps us because exercise does demand a little bit of that habit and discipline around stuff, because to be quite honest, sometimes it can be boring. And I say this all the time to people. I'm like, you've been training with me a long time. Many people, I've been training for 20 plus years of my life. and you've been doing it since a kid, is it's the same things. Like I always say, we're going to be doing squats, we're going to be doing push-ups, we're going to be doing all those things you do, but we need to do it again and again and again and build those habits. So yeah, that definitely it definitely stands out. So way to go on keeping that up for such a long time.
Well, you know, I don't mean to fast track right to now, right to the present, but I will also say though, and back to a little bit on consistency. Um, I'm now old enough, I'm in my early 50s, to actually know that it really is a privilege to feel well enough to work out. Like, so by the time you're in your 50s, sometimes you've gone through a little bit of something, whether it's, you know, I don't, you had a, which I've had a frozen shoulder for that I had to recover from, that took you out of doing that level of fitness. I've been pregnant before, where you can't just in the last month go for a jog, and you realize that there are things that will happen to you in your life or have happened, where you're not able to participate in some of those fitness things. And when I've had those periods in my life, I've realized, especially as I've been older, that I miss those, and that it really is like, it sounds really silly, but we're really lucky that we're healthy enough to be able to get up and do that. And so I honestly, while I don't love it first thing in the morning, and back to consistency, I'm an early morning person in my fitness routine with you. But the night before, I lay out my clothes, and I'm actually excited at that point. Like I literally at that point, I'm looking forward, and I'm happy that I'm going to have that session the next day. And then I'm ready to go. And I know we had talked about that over the years, because how I met you was in group fitness, but it was also early morning group fitness, where there was a lot more involved. I had to have everything organized the night before, just not just my gym clothes, but what I was going to wear, because I went directly from your class to the office. So what am I wearing at work? What am I doing the next day? What fitness clothes am I bringing? What am I setting my alarm to? What's the weather going to be like, so that I can get there? But all of that, like the prep the night before, I almost always was really happy and feeling really great that I was going to have the opportunity to do that. So that's one. And the second thing I'll tell you too, and I really noticed it this past year, Gareth, because I switched jobs about a year and a half ago. And it was really stressful for me for a long period of time, just like for most people. Changing jobs can, well, you know more than anyone because you've gone out and done your own business, but it's a prolonged, stressful period. I don't know anyone who wouldn't say that. And the one other thing I noticed about downtime, how to break out of that stress, is the good thing about physical activity and the way that you teach the classes is I do have to focus on what I'm doing. It doesn't matter that we've done it before. I have to focus on each movement. Thankfully, you create the list of movements. What are we going to do? You tell us what we're going to do, but I have to focus on it. I want to do it properly. And when I'm focusing on that, I can't worry about something else. And I really do like activities that you can't be worrying about your job while I'm trying to make sure that I'm doing the lunge properly, or you're teaching us a new movement. So I really also like that aspect of the group fitness, where you keep changing up these activities, even though we know how to do them, but we have to focus on them. And therefore, I am not worrying about something else. It is redirecting a part of my brain in a totally positive way. So I really do. I mean, that's, again, I don't think I realized that at all in my 20s, but in my 50s, that's something I've completely understood about the benefits of taking these kinds of classes with you.
Yeah, the mindfulness is such a huge part, and it's kind of I spoke about it today while I was coaching at Pilates. It's the same thing as there's an element, a principle of Pilates is relaxation, and people often say to me, well, it doesn't seem that relaxing. I'm doing these hardcore exercises and balancing, and I'm like, yeah, but how often are you in that moment and nothing else is in your brain at that moment? That in itself is relaxing for a lot of people, right? It's that clarity, not an empty mind, but a focused mind. So the mindfulness is huge. And I want to just say I was just constantly coming back to the same statement that I try and live by. And a friend of mine did this to me years ago, and it's always stuck with me. And it is that I get to, I don't have to. And when you change that and you flip that, and it sounds like something you've mastered really well, is that ability to say, I get to work out. I get to, and I try and use it in my life, right? I get to run this amazing business from my house. I get to have that extra time with my family. And, it's those days where sometimes I don't want to get up and do it. I'm like, I can't coach another hour. I'm going to go insane. I'm like, so many times it's so much of the same exercises and repetition is I tell myself, hey, I get to do this. This is a pretty awesome life I get to live, and embracing that. Right. And I think when whatever it is that we're doing, whatever task we're going about, if we can apply that, I get to mentality, I get to get up early, I get to work out, I get to, whatever it is it definitely changed my mindset a lot and helped me focus on the positive aspects of those things, even when I didn't want to do them. So that's a really important message. And yeah, mic drop. We could like wrap up now and there'd be all those takeaways for people. So it's wonderful. So thank you for sharing that. What I'm intrigued to know, and this is something I've picked up a lot with many conversations that I get to have. There you go. See, I did it. Is how did it affect you? So obviously as a kid, you were active, very into sport, so many positive that's for kids in general. Is what happened in those like teen years, at the back end of like high school, and we get a lot of other things going on in life at that point, right? There's so much exposure to other things and we're growing and developing. Did the exercise stay consistent for you at that point? Is it, did it float in and out during school? Were there new experiences, and when in that journey, did you find the gym, the typical gym environment as opposed to like the sport and activity environment?
Yeah, it's such a good question because I was thinking about this and there's definitely, there was a massive gap. And also back to my age, I mean, gyms weren't as big of a thing. So I probably followed the path of what was common in Toronto. I've grown up in Toronto all my life. So team sports all the way through high school. Then I went off to university, and truly, I don't recall doing any exercise at all other than walking to and from classes and dancing. Dancing is a good exercise, quite fun on the weekends. And I mean, just dancing in bars, sorry, no ballet or jazz or anything like that. So I actually don't think I really did that much in like probably all through my 20s. And then I think the exercise of choice and it was just by default was kind of going for a jog or going for a run. But I don't really love it that much. I'm not that great of a runner or that great of a jogger. And in fact, that's what's kind of got me towards the gym, because in my 30s, I think the only real exercise I was doing was going running and then trying to keep myself motivated, registered, a couple times for longer distance runs. And again, I'm a jogger, I'm not a runner, so I was not breaking any records, but that impact on my body actually wasn't great. And so I recall as I was doing some of this stuff in my 30s that I kind of thought, okay, I almost needed to take a break from the running. But I still, when I would go to the gym, I would still kind of walk on the treadmill or row. It was very aerobic focused. But again, I think that was part of the time. Like, I just don't think people were quite as aware of the different types of activities that you could do. I think pure aerobics and also, being a youngish aging woman, you're so focused on not gaining weight. I think that's just totally natural for, girls have that kind of beat into them. And so again, you would always think burn calories, do aerobics, but none of that was that exciting to me. It was kind of like, oh, I probably should do it, I'll go and do it. It wasn't the I get to do this mentality. And then as I got a little bit older, I think I had one moment in particular where, and this was just before I first met you, I think this was what brought me to your classes, where I was I had a very in-depth physical that was done like at a medical center, and everything was good. But they also would do some specific kinds of exercise-related tests to see what your general health was. And one of those tests was having to do a squat while holding a a pole over your head and trying to squat as far down as possible and keep your back as straight, perpendicular to the floor. And I was really terrible at that. And they made me really worried that, because I couldn't do this squat properly, that I was going to lose all mobility like really early on in the next few years. But it did kind of make me think about, okay, well, functional mobility and what kinds of things do I want to start to preserve? And so that coupled with, sorry, a very long story, I did have a version of early-ish osteoporosis, or not, my bones are not quite as dense as they should be. And again, then doing a little bit of reading, it's like, okay, but what about some weight bearing activity? Why am I not doing that? And so really that kind of made me look for, okay, is there a kind of a class that I could join? And I've never been against fitness classes. Back to the team thing, I always kind of like the idea of being around other people while you're doing your exercise. And that's where I found you in those classes. Your classes at the time were, a small enough group. There was once a week that was very strength focused, and I had never had that before. And the other with that, it was a little bit more cardio. And I guess it was kind of again, back to my age. I would have been in my 40s then, and thinking, well, I need more than just aerobics and calorie burning. I should really be focusing my exercise on what's going to give me the most. And that then was, as I said, some weight bearing activity and functional, to try to, just keep me like, back to what are your mantras now? One of mine is just, I just want to be able to keep doing what I can do now. I want to feel good. I want to, I don't want to wake up with aches and pains, and I don't want to suffer from kind of muscular pains or problems simply because I haven't been doing the right kinds of exercise. So that was a real pivot for me, I would say, which is kind of old school aerobics. Again, probably very common for women my age, where it was just like burn those calories, versus figuring out, wait a minute, how do I want to position myself for my future, for my future life, which is really, again, how I met you. And I know I've been talking forever, but I love, like, I feel very thankful that I was able to meet you in the in-person days, because I would imagine one of the challenges when you first really pick up those kinds of fitness classes online is, how do you know you're really doing the exercise properly? You're great at talking people through. Part of the reason I love being a member of your academy is that even when I hear you correcting other people's positions during our classes, it's like, oh, wait a minute, I think my shoulders were up by my ears, I better put them down. But because once you know how to do something, and once you know which muscles should feel this, then you're good to go. But sometimes for certain activities and certain exercises, that can take a long time, right? To be, where am I supposed, when I'm doing a row, what part of my back should really be feeling that exercise? So I'm very fortunate, I think. It made it extra easy, my transition to this kind of fitness, the fact that I was able to glean that from you in person. So I'm very fortunate that all came to be. And I have known you for a long time, because I first met you before Harley was around.
Yeah. So she turned 5. So just back in February. So yeah, that was, it would have been a year or two before that. So yeah, I said 5 years, but you're probably right. It's probably more like 7.
Just a little. Well, I think it was the summer before, maybe. So yeah, just over 5.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, well, that was, thank you for sharing all that. That's incredible. And never apologize for talking. Nothing better than when it just flows and you've got, lots to contribute. So a couple of things that you touched on, which I think are so important. Firstly, that strength cardio where, and as you said, typically where women fall into sometimes in that trap, and men too. But as you stated it, women kind of in a certain age range will fall into that kind of calorie burning. I'm going to go to the gym to burn calories. And I actually made a post about this. I can't remember what it was now. It was probably a few weeks ago, but I made a post online about how if you're going to the gym to burn calories, stop. Just stop. Because as you've just heard, firsthand experience is it typically is not going to lead to sustainable habits, because nobody really wants to. I don't care what anyone says. No one really wants to go there and pound the treadmill looking at how many calories they've burnt. Like, it's not inspiring. It doesn't necessarily, it might make you feel better in the moment because you're going to get that endorphin rush of moving and exercising and your blood flowing. But really, and it's also the amount of calories you do technically burn in that 45 minutes, half an hour of cardio is such a tiny amount in comparison to the other 16 hours of the day. It makes barely any difference, to be quite honest. So that's why it's just an endeavor that I think people are never going to see the success they're looking for. However, as you've experienced, when you go in with that purpose, I'm going to get better posture, I'm going to get stronger, I'm going to learn these movement qualities, I'm going to put all these things together and it's going to benefit my life. There's more bone density, there's better posture and alignment, which is going to take the stress off of your skeleton, your bones, your joints, like all those things. So it's huge. And I think if we address that mindset of going there to get strong, a byproduct of moving more is you burn calories. So just move more, but do it with intention, and you'll get that anyway. But it's going to shift that focus. And yeah, I love that you shared that. I think that's such an important message for so many people. And the pain-free living thing is huge. And I think I agree. I think this is an age thing. I think we all get to a point where we're like, all right, I just want to make sure I can continue. And we don't think about, and I didn't think about that in my 20s. Like I've got busted shoulders and busted ankles from overtraining and doing too much of things that, probably I didn't need to do because of the intention was maybe not the perfect intention for me. But yeah, pain-free living is huge. Like the ability to be able to just silly things that people forget. Like I was talking about it, I think it was yesterday. We were doing some ankle mobility and some lunging patterns. And I just shared with them, I was like, you might not think in the moment where this is relevant, but think when you have to bend down and tie your shoelaces up, you're going to lunge down and you're going to need good mobility to be able to get your knee over your toes, and then good mobility to be able to grab the shoelaces and do them up. Like, I want to be able to do that in 20, 30, 40 years. That's what I'm training for, life. So important. So yeah, have a think about that. Are we pain-free living? Are we creating that? And and that's also why we offer things like one-on-one mobility training and things where we focus in on that and we allow that. And we just had a great testimonial this week from a member saying that she'd been like a week or something consecutive days with no pain, like from someone that had been in pain every single day. So, things like that are huge, right? And however you come about that is really important. So I love that. And just to go back to originally what we mentioned was that gap in training, I think, is very common. And I always see that like high school, university gap where people maybe aren't doing organized sports so much that they kind of fall off. So I think that's just an important mindset for either yourself, if you're listening, but also kids, and thinking about activities like, are you gearing up for maybe that transition for older kids if you have them, and where they're going to get that activity from? Because it's not just their physical body, it's also their mind. And I haven't been to university, but I've done a fair bit of studying, and it can be stressful. Looking for a job can be stressful. Getting out of that learning environment into the workforce is stressful. So having an outlet at that point is going to be massively important.
And I think, I have kids who are that like who are university age now, although my youngest today is his birthday, 16. That's my youngest. But, everyone is different. Like, they're not all born, even if they have the same gene pool, they're not all the same. But what I do think is nice, and a couple of the two of the three have this. One is really not into physical activity of any nature. And so I think it will be like, for him, it will be a different kind of challenge as he gets older to find things that he likes to keep him healthy. The other two, I think, have figured out enough that they like, there's certain activities that they like that are just good activities. Like my daughter, who's the oldest, who's away a couple times in the winter, and she's away at school, but a couple times she has her ice skates, and they went out to the local outdoor skating rink. And that was an activity. Instead of going and sitting at a bar and drinking alcohol, they went out ice skating, right? So just knowing that you have a few, activities or things that you like to do. And my youngest really does, similar to how I grew up. He likes his team sports. And I think also it's better, like part about universities, there always had been kind of good intramural opportunities, but not in the same way as I think there are now. So I think it's even for kids who are younger and in high school, when they leave that sphere, I think they know more to look for those opportunities of, oh, hey, I can just join that soccer club. Like, why wouldn't I play that? Or this baseball team or a softball team in the summer, right? So I think that's one thing I hope my kids keep doing, is just looking for those opportunities of, like you said, like to not totally drop out, because I think it's really easy to, and you started at the start, you talked about nutrition, and I didn't really answer you. I was raised, as many people again my age were, you cooked at home. Period. And almost nobody went out for dinner. Like if you were middle class growing up where I did in Toronto, like you didn't grow, your parents didn't take you out for dinner. You ate what was at home, and there were very few already prepared foods, right? So I think just by nature, like whether we ate too much meat or ate too many carbs, but at least the fact that you were almost always eating at home right there, I think was pretty good nutrition. And the thing I worry about for younger people these days is the world's completely gone the opposite. Like the number of young people who learn in high school, oh, I'll order takeout from McDonald's and it will come to my door. Like those kinds of habits are pretty brutal. So again, I'm kind of lucky I didn't grow up in that zone, because it's almost like something that people need to overcome, the ease in which you can now buy processed food and make that your daily caloric intake. It's pretty scary, and it's almost something to overcome. Whereas again, like when I grew up, you ate at home, you cooked your own food, you learned, if you wanted a snack after school, you learned how to make your own grilled cheese. Yeah. And you did, and maybe it wasn't perfect snack, but not a bad snack. So that's kind of another thing. My husband is actually a great cook, so thankfully my kids all see that, and they're used to at least knowing what it looks like to be able to put a pretty good meal together. And of course, we eat out certainly way more than I did when I was a kid, and that's a nice luxury to have. But just the fact that we're in a position, we're lucky enough, we can kind of model how to cook pretty good meals that at least have a balance, right? Always have some veg, always have, a little bit of carbs. Like, we're not perfect by any means, but I'm very lucky, I think, just to have kind of grown up in that time where you still had to learn to cook for yourself before, as you became an adult. Because like I said, I don't think that's necessarily typical anymore. And it certainly could be a challenge, I'm sure, for a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it is all the time. I speak to so many people, especially with young kids, that struggle to navigate that, right? Like so many people are, busy, and, not that people weren't, my parents or your parents weren't busy, but, there's so many, both parents working. It's hard to navigate that stuff. This is something that comes up a lot, and questions for me as a coach. And it's like, as hard as it is, like you've got to prioritize that stuff, because your kids are going to be impacted by that as they go through life. And I'm a firsthand experience of that as a kid. But yeah, finding that, having those role models, right, for nutrition, for movement, because kids just mirror what they see. If they're doing the same as their behavior as well. So I always laugh about this, and I was like, it's like looking in a mirror. I'm like, oh, I see exactly why you're doing that, and you're acting out like that, because that's exactly what I do when I don't like something, or when, I have a reaction to something. So they just mirror you, and they pick that stuff up. So, we're very conscious of that in our house. And I'm very fortunate that Nikki is she's a big stickler for everybody sits down to eat at the table together. And, that's imprinted on me, having been married for so many years. So we just do it. It's a natural thing that we always do. We prepare food. Harley's involved in that, and everybody sees it. And it was so important to me as well, as a parent, to start to do that. because it does have a big impact. I grew up, so I just turned 40 last year. So I grew up a bit later. So we're like kind of like early mid 80s. Now, in the early mid 80s, everybody had a microwave, and it started the generation of, oh, you can just buy everything in a box and put it in the microwave, or put it in the oven. So I kind of grew up a little bit off of the back of that, where I think my mum and dad kind of went through that as kids, definitely, because they're in their, their 60s now, 60s, 70s. And then there was that transition through into the 80s where it just went like cardboard box in the fridge. And I would say 80s, but that probably more so than 90s, I'd say, as I kind of got, into like, 10 and above. Everything was in a box. Everything was in the microwave. And really, I'm very fortunate that I didn't have many rules as a kid. Like, there were some certain things that my mum and dad were sticklers about, but other than that, they were kind of like figure it out, which I do appreciate, because it helped me figure a lot of things out, and they let me kind of go and do my own thing, and I'm very grateful of that. The not so good point of that is that I could just eat whatever I wanted whenever I wanted, and that ended me up, at 220 odd pounds, probably at 16. And it came a lot from that, right? Because they weren't big, like cooking in our family wasn't a big thing. We didn't always eat together as a family. And my dad would work all day. My mum would go out to work at night. There wasn't really like that crossover time to do that. And it does have a big impact on you. And it took me 20 years to figure out like disordered patterns around eating because of that, right? Because of that, just that ability to do things and the emotional connection I have to food, in my kind of makeup as a person, and things I was exposed to. So yeah, busy parents out there, as hard as it is, it does have a big impact on us as adults. So definitely dial in and pay attention to that.
Yeah, and for sure. And I think you would say this too. Like I stopped reading how to parent books like partway through the very first pregnancy book I ever read, because I'm like, this can't be right. The whole world isn't the same. Like, everybody's different. Every family is different. Don't let other people tell you what to do, for sure. But also don't beat yourself up. I think, and this is kind of similar to fitness, right? Like, don't have this expectation of, I think you had clips of this on your Instagram recently about being perfect. Like, that's not a thing. Don't try to be perfect in any way. But I think, and something as like back to families and nutrition and everything, it's kind of just be mindful, kind of try your best, but nobody's perfect, and there's many days where as a parent you're probably, to just get any kind of food on the table, no matter where it comes from, that's a good outcome. But if that's every single day, and if it, like you said, if it's every single day coming out of a box and loaded with sodium, maybe that's when you just need to stop and pause a little bit. But I wouldn't want to give anybody the impression that we're perfect at all. I'm very lucky. I mean, that's the other thing I've learned in this world of social media. The one thing I've learned the most about, when I'm going through my Twitter feed is really, I'm very lucky. Like, I come from a place where I had, I would say I'm surprised when I'm in social media, the number of people who in their youth went through versions of trauma, and it can be anything, right? It can be absolutely anything, but I really didn't have that. So I'm very thankful. And so I definitely come to this conversation from a position of privilege. There's no question. And I'm very thankful for that. So, can't tell people what to do when you haven't been walking in their shoes, right?
No, for sure. Yeah. And I think that's a really great point, and, giving yourself some grace on those things, right? But it's about I call it balance, but I have an aversion to that word when we say we create balance in our life, because technically I don't see it as balance, but what I see it is actually an imbalance. What you want to do is create an imbalance, so the optimal choices around things like your movement, your nutrition, like you said, how you parent, and everyone's different. There's no perfect way to do it. You nailed that. There is no perfection. But if we can tip the scale, so the more that we're leaning towards optimal decisions for those sorts of things more often than we're not, then because I always see balance as 50-50. 50-50 probably a bit too much of the less optimal than the optimal. So yeah, leaning towards that. And that's like you said, right? You're just being mindful, being aware of those things, try and have certain days or set realistic goals around, when you're going to eat as a family, or when you're going to get movement in for you personally, or whatever that might be. And you're right, it's such a tough thing to navigate. And I actually am a big reader of parenting books. Funny enough that you should say that. But the old adage of a pinch of salt, right? You take everything with a pinch of salt and say, some things are going to work. I really love this, and I really don't like this part of it. Take it or leave it. Yeah. And I'm sometimes it feels like when I read those things and kind of digest that, and, I regurgitate it in different forms, within coaching, is sometimes it feels as though I sit on the fence with a lot of things. But the mentality behind that is that no one is the same, and you can't just take one method and say, I will only do this style of fitness, I will only eat this style of diet, because it doesn't work for everybody. Yeah. They all typically work for the same reason, but they don't all work for everyone depending on the way you do it. So yeah, give yourself some grace and choose things you enjoy to do, because as we heard, when you've got to go and bash the treadmill doing cardio, counting numbers, it's not much fun. So find something you enjoy.
And even how I totally remember this too, like literally people, back to fitness and your clients, like we are literally built differently. We are each put together differently. And I remember noticing this when we would have some of the in-person sessions with you, and one of my classmates, I think, had, one of her shoulders was, always seemed to hinder her a little bit, or she had to adapt a little bit when we were doing heavy weights. And I remember looking, I'm like, yeah, literally her shoulder was built in a different way. Like she certainly did not have the same mobility in that joint that I have. And she was clearly born that way, or had an accident that put her that way. Like there's nothing you could do as a coach to demand that she, stand up straighter, or you have to kind of adapt as a coach, I would think. And I'm interested in hearing that, like if you've noticed that over the years, or if you've become more cognizant of it, because I certainly kind of got awareness of that when I was in some of the classes, which is, well, you can tell us how to do a certain exercise, but none of us will be doing it the exact same way, because literally our bodies are built differently.
Yeah, it's a very astute observation, because it is exactly that. And they're the optimal ways to do things, or there's things to look at, that things that make an exercise what it is, as opposed to this is how you do the exercise. That's where I've changed my mindset as a coach. There's these certain things. So for example, I'll use a deadlift versus a squat. So if anyone doesn't know, they look like a very similar movement. So if you're listening today, you're not quite sure, one is you're a lot more upright in your torso, one you're a bit further forward in your torso position. A deadlift, you pick the weight up from the floor. A squat, you typically travel from the top down. So they're very different, but they look similar. And what I came to realize is this isn't how we squat. These are the fundamental things that make this a squat. So the angle of the shin and the torso are very similar in a squat. In a deadlift, they're very different. However, there's no perfect angle, because trying to get the right angle at your shin and your torso is going to vary if you're on the length of your bones, right? Yeah. So the depth of the hip joint, the shape of the hip joint varies from male to female. So yeah, you have to be so attuned to that. And when I started 20 plus years ago, yeah, it was just like, well, this is just a squat. Everybody needs to squat like this. And you're like, oh, and then you realize things like there's these cues from years ago, like keep your knees behind your toes. But what if you've got really, really long femurs? So the bone at the top of the leg is really long. Your knees are never going to stay behind your toes. And if you try to do it, you're going to fall over. Right. It doesn't work, right? Like you have to be able to look at it, the biomechanics of the body, that it is different for everybody. So, and that is a big challenge for a lot of coaches. And especially when you're new to it, because you start at a certain, and like any job, any profession, you start at that base level of understanding, and then you have to grow into it, right? You have to learn that there's nuances in that, because as you said, everyone's different.
Yeah, but I think you and Nikki both do, like, to me, one thing that's valuable as, someone who's in your academy is both of you very often say, this is where you should feel this. Like this part of your body, right? And I think that's extra important when we're doing it in the video age, and maybe even more important with some of the classes I take with Nikki, where we're more kind of yoga focused, where you think you're doing it. Like you see, I watch Nikki do it. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I can do that. And then I hear her make some correcting comments. I'm like, oh, I wasn't really doing it that way. But her point isn't really telling you how to change. She's more usually telling you this, you should feel it here. The pressure should be here, or the muscle you're feeling should be this part of your back muscle. That's really important because back to everybody being different. My eye can see what you're doing. My brain can tell me how to copy you, but I don't know that I'm really not until you're giving me a little bit of extra pieces of feedback. And both of you guys do that really, really well. And I think that's it's really important for us as we want to improve, to make sure we are using the right muscles in our body to create this exercise. So I think you guys are both great at that, and I thank you for that.
Well, thank you. It's very kind, and yeah, we pride ourselves on that. The teaching exercise and educating people how to move their bodies are very different things, because the eye can teach a movement and it doesn't cross over. And this is where the age of, and I'll be very clear by pre-framing this and saying there's great value and there's lots of free, amazing resources out there for health and fitness that you can access. However, they have their limits, right? As does what we do in our platform has its limits. Obviously, we're on a screen, so it has limits. But what we're able to do is to take that. I go onto YouTube and download a video or watch a video and do an exercise. Is really, you don't know if you're getting that just right. And then people say, oh, but I have a mirror. And I'm like, yeah, but for you, you might be looking at yourself doing it wrong and it might look right to you. Whereas a professional looking in to say, actually, there's a few little things that we can adjust there. And that's where obviously we've kind of built our platform out and try to keep it unique in that respect. But I definitely learned pretty quick from going online a couple of years ago that I always thought my cueing and my ability to get people in the right position and moving well was really good. Like I had a really good skill set for it. And then we started coaching online and I got a big shock of reality that it actually wasn't as good as I thought. And only from the standpoint that I always have the ability to fall back on tactile cues, to be able to put people in the right position and say, do it here. Let me guide you through the right position. Now you can feel it. Now you can feel it. Repetition, repetition, repetition. Now you've got it. Now I have to do that without being able to put anyone in the right position, which becomes really tricky. And it's a whole new skill set. And, as simple as it was for many people to say, I'm just going to go online, is we realized that if we were going to do this and make it a viable option for people, even that gyms are open now, is we had to be able to enhance our skill set and realize that there was a whole different skill that we had to learn to be able to ensure people could continue with those amazing quality movements and get that benefit from it. So yeah, really important that we understand that. And I would say that's a really good piece of advice for anyone listening that's looking for a coach. Whether you're looking for a coach online, we have some great services at the Nock Academy that you can check out. But even if you're looking for a coach, you're going to the gym and you're looking for someone to do that, that's something that's so powerful. Someone that's teaching you and educating you how to move well. And I always approach it with the mindset of, one day I'm not going to be here. And I don't mean that morbidly. I mean, one day I might not be here. One day I decide I don't want to run a business anymore. I want to go, live under a rock, or you decide you want to train with someone else, or whatever it might be. Is I want everyone to feel empowered to say, I know how to execute this squat really well. I know what it's meant to feel like, and I know how to adjust it when it doesn't feel like that, just for an example. So I'm glad that you're empowered in that way. And I hope that everyone listening can find that within their coach, their fitness coach specifically. That leads to a good point, actually, and something else I wanted to ask. So we obviously heard that, we had the pleasure of, working together in person and, for quite a few years. What was that kind of, was COVID, the pandemic, how did that affect you mentally, physically, when it initially started? Where did those kind of initial thoughts of health and fitness go, and how easy was it for you to adapt from having live coaching to going to virtual coaching?
It was, I think I had a particular kind of particular outcome, which was, and maybe other people did this too, I right away tried to have access to as much online as possible, online, anything, right? So I'm lucky enough. I found, there's a part in my house now. It takes up my living room, but there's a part of my house I can do exercise, and if I do it when people aren't around, there's no problem. And I have a house, so I don't have to worry about making noise for my neighbors. So I adopted very quickly some kind of virtual type of activities. My problem is pretty early on, and maybe this was a reaction to COVID and the unknown and all of that jazz. I kind of got into this habit of, okay, I'm going to do a whole bunch of very similar, very repetitive exercise to really get in a lot of exercise in a short period of time. So what I did almost right away was I started doing more and not giving my body rest days. So naturally, with what I had been doing with you, there was a couple days a week. Then I would do some stuff on the weekend myself. So I had these natural break days. So with COVID, I have a job where I could just continue to work from home, but like, oh my gosh, how boring, I'm working from home. So I started doing all this exercise almost right away and nonstop, and like kind of burpees and push-ups and squats day after day after day. And about 3 months into that, I got a frozen shoulder. And I convinced it's 100% because I just started to do a little bit too much with never giving myself a break. And some of those activities were like just weight bearing, where you don't even necessarily think of it, but yeah, you do burpees, and that's weight bearing on that part of my arm. And so then that took me into rehab. So basically early on in COVID, I was in rehab. But the nice thing about me having been, with you was I'm like, okay, well, I got to rehab this, but I know where I want to get back to. I need to get back to this functional mobility, because a frozen shoulder is incredibly painful, but also like no mobility whatsoever. So I think I rehabbed. I had good discipline to rehab like crazy. And then I got back in with you when you were starting back doing some classes. And I knew enough to know that when I rejoined, I shouldn't get disappointed with my weakness. So what that caused was I realized after a few classes with you, I was like, oh my gosh, this isn't just about my shoulder anymore. I've lost all the strength on the left hand side of my body. Like I literally, my lats, we talk a lot about lats in your classes, like no strength. It was shocking to me when we would come back and just try to do some plank activities. It wasn't my shoulder. It was like my core muscles and the side of my core completely gone. But I knew enough from having done all these classes with you that, okay, I just, I just kind of adapt. I do certain exercises, and you're very good with that too. I know I've been on with other people who have injuries or weaknesses, and you're very good at telling us how to adapt certain exercises. Usually it's obvious, or if it's not, we ask the question and you just tell us, right? So I think knowing to get back into fairly regular activity after I was through the formal rehab, but also knowing, like, I think what got me in that problem in the first place was trying to do too much in a short period of time. So I kind of think I had this swing reaction to COVID, which was like, oh my gosh, let's just, I don't know, the world's crazy. Let's just do all this activity nonstop, do it like crazy, not have any. That was at a time where we were just watching video. There was no interaction really going on at all, right? So injured myself, rehabbed it, but then knew enough that was, luckily for me, you were starting back these interactive sessions where I was able to take my time and not push myself. And I think that's another thing for people who are getting older. Like, it's going to happen, right? You're going to do something, you're going to pull a muscle. I mean, the other nice thing about having been in your classes is, like, I know the difference between a sore muscle because I worked really hard versus, oh, wait a minute, I think this could be a problem if I don't watch it. And I think that's, as you get older, you just need to be mindful of that. Like, yes, it's good to be consistent. But when you have to modify, you modify, because otherwise you could put yourself over the edge. So yeah, my COVID experience, I feel like, was all over, but I'm really so happy that, by about a year into it, I was doing these regular sessions back with you and able to build my strength up. And it's really quite remarkable. Like I remember from the time I started back with you, even 6 months later, just 2 days a week, it was really all I was doing at that time with you. And I wasn't really doing a lot other than that, but it was like, oh, just that consistency. I know I'm stronger. I know I've built back some of my muscle strength.
That's incredible to hear. And obviously I heard about that firsthand at the time with the shoulder and, constantly kind of staying in contact and getting you to that point and, helping you along that journey. Some great points that you made that I want to go back to. First of all is, like you said, a couple of days a week, you build that strength up pretty quick when you do intentional movement. That's a really good message to anyone that feels like they're not getting the results that they're looking for, and then increase the amount of activity to get them. This, again, when it comes to setting yourself realistic, sustainable stuff, not a great recipe for success, because where does it end? If you go, and again, I go back to the whole, I'm going to go to the gym to burn calories. Like, where does that end? You just, like you in the gym for 4 or 5 hours, it's not realistic. So going with that right intention of, I want to build that strength back. I want to have, good functionality in my body, is we don't always need a lot to do that. A couple of training sessions a week, whatever it looks like. And yeah, if you're a professional sports person or you have some sort of, performance-based goal, do you need a bit more than that? Highly likely. However, if you're looking to maintain good health, moving more and being active, it doesn't have to consume your entire life to do it. And that's really important, especially with a lot of people listening today that are probably in our market of busy parents. It's tough. You got a lot of other things on your plate. Like we said, you got to plan meals. You got to be a good role model. You got to drop off and pick up from school. You got to have a job. Like, it's all these things, right? So just fitting in a couple of sessions a week is so impactful. And, hopefully we've built a platform for enough people now that we can make that accessible and simple for people to go, hey, I just need 30 minutes to jump in here at lunchtime on my lunch break and get that done. So that's really important. The other thing you said that I want to come back to, which is such an important point that leads to why having a coach is a really good idea, because there are plenty of exercise videos for someone like yourself that had exercised regularly and really knew how to move your body successfully through those exercises. You're still able to create an imbalance. And that's typically where we get these pains from, right? Like the frozen shoulders, or we get, a knee pain or an elbow pain, is typically because of balance. And this is where the science of exercise selection is so important, and what sometimes gets missed, because we can know what we're doing, but there's a real science into making sure that one muscle or the opposing muscle group is working just as much. And this is where a great coach is going to serve everybody really well, and someone that's going to design that. And then that might be a trainer you go to at the gym. It might be someone online. It might be someone that puts together a program for you because you are capable of doing it yourself. But understanding those little bits of information is so important. It's also the reason I have an accountant, because I understand this is $1 and I understand this is how much I spent and this is how much I made as a business. But I don't know the fine details of that. So you know what I do? I send it all to him, and then I get money back, and it's great. And I don't have to worry about it. And I just do the bare minimum of that, right? Because I understand it, but I don't understand it at the level. So I think that's really important. And it speaks to why having a coach in some capacity is such a good idea. And not just for your fitness, but for anything. So good message for everybody listening.
Yeah. Well, and I think I know that you guys do some are getting into one-on-one coaching, and I've been thinking about that, and I think again it can be different for different people, I would imagine, right? Because like one of the things I was thinking about, and I really noticed this in particular in some of the classes I've taken with Nikki, and also there was another instructor that I sat in on. I can't remember his name, not that long ago.
Oh, Trevor's session. Yeah.
Trevor.
Yep.
And between Nikki's yoga sometimes and Trevor, I became much more aware, and actually you've done some of these and I love them as well. When we have some classes where we focus on one side and then the other side of our bodies, like when we do a lot more of those, what do you call those? Like unilimb or
unilateral. Yeah.
Unilateral stuff. Yeah. But I've noticed as I've done any of those classes, I'm like, there's definitely an imbalance here. Like, and I can't exactly, I'm not smart enough to pinpoint, because I'm smart enough to know from you guys, sometimes when I have like my lower left back is sore, that's actually because like my right hip muscle isn't doing something properly. Like, I'm smart enough to know that often some of the, I will call like weird feelings I get in some parts of my body, I think are actually related to an imbalance. And as I start to explore that a little bit, that might be something I go to you guys for, because I'd actually love to kind of work with you and have your views, because I have a feeling there's probably like a few exercises you or Nikki could have me do where you would say, oh, okay, you completely don't have strength in this one side of your body here, and it's causing X. And so just A, that knowledge about yourself, but B, okay, well, what types of things should I work on? Should I target for that muscle? That would be something for me that I could get out of a one-on-one session. Whereas I'm sure other people, it would be more just like, okay, I need someone to just get me into this headspace. Like I'm in the wrong headspace. Like I'm in a fine headspace. I really love my routine with you guys, but I know that I think there's something a little bit more that I could probably do. And you know, again, I just think that the sessions I have with, you know, with your academy, I feel like I'm really able to focus on some of those things and then consider, okay, what can maybe get me to the next level? And like I said, the next level doesn't mean doing more necessarily, but it maybe means doing something differently or doing something that will have a different outcome or impact. And I kind of love that. I love that about what this, you know, what your group classes are. I think they've got something for everybody. And you know me, like I'm very, you know, I'm kind of addicted to three of your morning classes in particular, and I've gotten more into Nikki's yoga over time as well, and that's just a tiny bit of what you guys offer, and I'm aware of that, and it's great to have the opportunity to try other things here and there for sure. But I you know, I do like I like what you're bringing for us, because I really do think different people get different things out of what you're providing, and we get what we need though, which is really fantastic. I think it's a great offering.
Well, thank you. And yeah, it's definitely something that we saw as an opportunity, that there was people's ability to navigate those group-based sessions. And yes, there's interaction, there's coaching, but sometimes you got 10, 15 people up on the screen. Like that's a lot to people to coach. So you get a little bit of that taster. And a lot of people say, oh, and Nikki found that she was, that's kind of her speciality with the mobility stuff, is she found she was recording so many videos because people were like, I've got this and this. And her being so passionate about that was like, I'm going to record them a quick 10-minute video and send it to them. And this is what you're going to do and do this and this. And then I'm like, all right, you know what we need to do? You know, from a business standpoint, like we can monetize that. So many people need a little bit more. So let's give them an opportunity to get a 30-minute session or 30-minute sessions a week to actually go through that stuff. And, you know, the story I shared earlier about one of the members that came and said, I'm pain free. She's doing exactly the same sessions that she was doing, but she's just addressed these other little things that have really helped. And again, where coaching comes in, and it's such a good investment, and it really is an investment, because when you move better, you create that longevity. And yeah, and I'm glad that I'm glad it's giving you lots of offerings, because I'll share that, you know, and anyone listening that runs a business will hear this, it's hard to please everyone when you're trying to cater to a big audience, right, of people, and trying to get the right sessions at the right time and we just changed the schedule recently, and we had this week where I think we did it on a holiday, and then I had this like 4-day like deep like anxiety attack that I'd ruined the schedule for everyone and everyone was going to leave because people weren't there. And then the next week came and I was like, oh, okay, everyone's come back, it's fine. So
And it's hard for you. I feel for you, because we're all, most people are in their own change right now when it comes to their lives, right? Like a lot of people who have been employed, they worked a certain way 2.5 years ago. Then through COVID, they probably had to change that up quite a bit. And now we're back in a place where it seems like maybe people are migrating back to what might be the normal, but it's not, right? And so, and I do think it, I appreciate how flexible you guys have been, because your whole membership's lives are changing all around as well. So it's been very, it's been great to have you guys almost as like this little stability beacon for those of us who are like, okay, what, can I still bring any routine to my week? Oh, okay, great. Yeah, those classes are still available. That's been wonderful for me.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that that's impacted, and we hope that we can bring that to so many people, because it is, and in all honesty, it gives you it gives me a purpose, and from a personal level, it's a routine, because I know what the schedule is. I know when I need to teach, where I can fit my stuff in around that, right? And it's been a really interesting journey, but a fun one. So we've really enjoyed it, and it's been incredible to hear the impact it's had on you. I just want to kind of, before we wrap up, is just ask if there's anything else you want to share, Deanna, anything else you want to share with anyone listening today, anything about, your journey, or anything else you want to leave us with.
I'm really thankful. It was complete happenstance that I ended up in your class in particular. Like I knew I wanted to do something, and it literally, it was like, oh, that's available. That works in my schedule. I don't know those people at all, but I'll give it a shot. And it started out, I think, what did you used to do? 8-week sessions, or like 12 weeks?
Yeah, normally 12. Yeah.
12. Okay. So it started out as a 12-week session. And
Yep.
now I'm, 6 weeks later. And honestly, I mean, I'm such an oldie, but I learned Instagram because of you guys. Like, there's some social media platforms I did not use at all until you guys were talking a little bit about, like, oh, I like this fitness person. I'm interested in this fitness person. And that's the way some of your previous members used to communicate, and how we do now. Right. So it's a big fluke. I'm glad I joined, despite the fact that I was, familiar with exercise. I do remember the first few times I showed up, I really didn't know what to expect. I had never done any kind of weights before. So, like, using barbells, it just doing a whole session of non-aerobic based activity. I don't know that I had ever done that before. So it was still kind of scary for me, but I think you're so good at what you do. And then I'm glad I met Nikki more. Actually, I didn't really know her until the Nock Academy. You're both so good at what you do, and I think I'm very, very appreciative that you went out, you took a shot at this business, because, sometimes really great things, like for me, just that one fluky, I need to do something. Who is this person? Okay, join this class. I mean, honestly, 6 years later, and I think it's changed a lot of my whole perspective on how I want to continue to be fit, or exercise, or be mobile. I think I've just continued to learn so much from you over the years. So, if those are my parting words, that's what they are, because I feel very fortunate. I'm so glad it happened. And I just look forward to continuing to be in your group. It's really been a pleasure and a privilege.
Well, thank you so much. That means the world to me. Having an impact in that capacity, it always means a lot, and it also keeps me grounded as a coach and as a business owner, because you can get lost sometimes in the finer details, but making an impact is so important. So I appreciate you sharing that, and just appreciate you sharing your journey, a little bit about kind of where you've been. And when we have these conversations, it does, for anyone listening, it creates a permission for others to kind of share their story, but also be in their story. Like we said, give yourself some grace, understand that there's not a perfect route to an end goal. It's just a continuing journey. So thank you so much for joining me. Everyone listening, thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed it. I know you would have got some great takeaways. I really enjoyed the conversation. And as always, if you did get some great bits of information, share this episode with someone you love and care about, because it gets the message out there to more and more people, so we can have more and more impact. That's it for today's show. Appreciate you listening, and we will catch you on the next episode.